What is up? Phil Swanson back again. Another tremendous guest that is internationally recognized among the top 1% of performance consultants. This individual shows his clients how to inspire productivity and produce positive cultures. His clientele include Fortune 100 companies, professional athletes, entrepreneurs, academic institutions, and family-owned businesses. His easy action steps and solutions are steeped in performance science and designed to grow leaders, speakers, teams, and businesses. He has a distinct background, including the Fox News Channel, which is pretty cool, Dale Carnegie training, psychometric analysis, and positive psychology under the guidance of world-renowned professors at Harvard, University of Pennsylvania, as well as MIT's Sloan School of Management, where he learned negotiation science and the psychology of influencing. If you haven't heard Chris yourself, which I haven't, and I'm excited to talk to him today, or attended one of his sessions, chances are we've probably heard his speeches as Chris helps celebrities, corporate execs, and even other presenters often develop, design, and deliver messages that wow audiences. And I'm thrilled to have Chris Flickinger on the show with me today. Chris, welcome to GLE.
Phil, wow, thank you very much, sir. You got a great voice. I mean, honestly, if this fails, you got to pick up radio.
You got to know your strengths, right? You got to take account of your abilities.
That's right.
I'm digging the radio voice. So believe it or not, I was the volleyball announcer at my university. So
there you go.
I had some announcer voice experience.
Yeah. Was that really for the announcing, or was that looking for a date?
Yeah, it could be either. It could have been either at the time for sure.
Okay.
But man, Chris, it's great to finally chat with you, man. I know you're up in the Pennsylvania area.
Yeah.
What's things like up there now in this COVID time?
Well, so a few days here before New Year, and we had we're thawing out from a white Christmas. It's cold. We've had 2 major snowstorms of the year. Meanwhile, everyone else, like I'm talking to my clients down in Texas, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're going golfing," just rubbing it in.
Right.
No, it's okay. It's we have the pleasure of Governor Wolf, who I'm not a huge fan of, unfortunately. He's like the Meister burger. You know that one? You know that Christmas story?
Yeah.
There's no Christmas this year. There's no toys this year. There's no this.
Yeah, right.
So, but hey, we're surviving as much as we can, trying to go through this and navigate the change that we've got. But it's certainly been an interesting year. We'll see.
Yeah, definitely an interesting year. So, Chris, give us your story. Tell us how Chris Flickinger came to be. You do have a very unique background, a lot of wide variety of experience. So how did you get to starting and consulting in the capacity you do today?
So the truth is, and this is the best news for anybody and everybody out there. The best news is that I got here through a tremendous amount of failure and heartache and pain. And if that's something that they're going through, hey, congratulations, you're on the fast track to success. I know it probably feels slow and it sucks, but hey, this is the right train. So I graduate from Ohio University, the EW Scripps School of Journalism, one of the top broadcast schools in the country. Was the first student out of that university to work for the Fox News Channel, and was in New York City, Washington, D.C., got to work with Bill O'Reilly, Rita Cosby, Geraldo Rivera, Shepard Smith, Steve Ducey. The just phenomenal folks. Got to learn a ton from them. Had all the gadgets and gizmos, and it was everything at your fingertips, right? But I wanted to be, and my specialty there was I was a assistant booking producer. My job was to get people onto the show and then to help develop the content for that show and the angles that the host would ask questions on. But I wanted to be on air. Well, to do that, they don't let you just start at the top. So off to the farm league I went, upstate New York, in a powerhouse local affiliate. Did it for about a year. And then believe it or not, that's when the real journey started. So like all through my career, high school, college, early professional career, I was on this very steep success trajectory. Like I was the lead in the school play, top of my class, all these. And then I get to this upstate New York affiliate, and I'm doing really well. And then all of a sudden, I'm 24 years old. I start to get some bizarre physiological feelings, like I'm gonna pass out, like floating in the air, like I can't, like I literally, my throat's closing up, I can't breathe, and all this stuff. So long and the short of it is, I start having panic attacks. Fast forward a little bit more. At age 24, I am diagnosed with panic anxiety disorder, agoraphobia, OCD, and clinical depression, all four all at once at 24.
What was the second one?
Panic anxiety disorder, agoraphobia.
What's agoraphobia?
Agoraphobia. So basically, I somehow I pick a defined safe area, okay, an area that I feel comfortable with. It could be my physical home. It could be my hometown. It could be on this side of the bridge. And anywhere within that area, I feel okay. Take one step out. The further I get away from that comfort zone, the worse I feel.
Interesting.
So they tend to not let those types of people who have those conditions on the air. I don't know what's wrong with them, but they tend to not let those folks go on the air.
I wonder why.
So I don't know, what am I supposed to do? I'm married at the time. My wife and I, we moved back home to Pittsburgh, and I start to see this guy who ends up being, he's one of the specialists in the country who deals with those issues. And at the end of the day, what it comes down to is that I'm a perfectionist.
Mm-hmm.
I put a lot of pressure on myself. And in fact, so much so that my mind starts to work against me as opposed to for me. The guy helps me an awful lot. He gets me to a point where I can re-enter the world productively. I start with Dale Carnegie, some motivational company. And I'm a salesperson for them. I'm out pushing their product. But all of a sudden, like my career starts to skyrocket. I mean, like I'm really good at it. And, well, how did this happen? It was basically because the way in which he helped rewire my approach to the world, my thinking, my productivity, the way I use and perform certain habits, I was able to not just go back into the world, but to excel through it. I really was. And I give him a tremendous amount of credit. He's a great friend today. But I just, for a decade, this happened. And I became so enamored with what happened and how it happened and how he did it for me. And it was allowing me to go into to just become more than what I thought was possible, even having high standards, that I said, well, hey, look, should I become a psychologist? And he said, oh, Chris, no, that's not for you. I said, what are you talking about? I said, I love this stuff. I'm proof positive of it. Right. He goes, listen, I sit around all day and I talk to people with their problems. He goes, you're too positive. You need to be on the positive side of this. And he goes, that's something called positive psychology. So, and that's actually what he took me through and helped me to re-engineer my own thinking. So I got to go learn from some folks at University of Pennsylvania, a great person at Harvard and MIT. And basically I learned the science of performance. And that's really, and what I do today is I show leaders or organizations how to get inside the minds of others. Now, I know that sounds scary. I know it sounds like it could be used for the dark side of the force. However, I tend to use this to inspire productivity and a positive culture. And that's what I'm trying to do. How can we get people to do it better, do it faster, and to be more effective?
Very cool, Chris. Very crazy story too.
It is.
Let's go back, because I want to know, when I hear about you going through this experience at 24, being a high performer, I kind of resonate with it as an athlete who was a very high performer in like my high school days, and then kind of struggled into my, I kind of struggled with that identity as I went through my college years and started competing at higher levels. And, I've gone through that in other roles as well, where you've always performed at the top. And I think, I don't know if it's always being that high performer in school, or maybe like other students have gone through this where they're always getting great grades or whatever. And then they get to something where they start experiencing failure in the real world, or maybe like in your experience, you're at Fox News and you're seeking after certain roles and they're just not coming in the time that you'd want, and you're encountering things. What was going on through your mind as you encounter having panic attacks, like being a high performer, and now you're like, you had to be like, what's going on? I have actually had a panic attack. I think I've had one, because I remember in my internship in when I was in my college days, I had a moment where I was talking to one of my supervisors, and I literally had to like walk out on him. I didn't even know how to approach it. I didn't know what to do. I thought I was like standing in the room, and I thought I was going to die. And these two guys are standing there, and I had to like leave the room and go get water. And it was the weirdest thing, but it's the only time I've ever experienced that. And I can't imagine, people that go through that all the time and are dealing with that every day. So like, what was going on in your head as a high performer when that started happening to you?
You feel like a complete failure. You hope that it's a fluke. In the back of your mind, you're thinking that it's not a fluke, though. And if this can happen this time, it can happen at any random time. You feel completely vulnerable, completely out of your element, and you start to feel like a fraud, because all of a sudden it's a deck of cards, and it's extremely shaky ground. The challenge is what do you do with this, right? Initially, the first time it happens, it's can be like, well, okay, I don't know what that was.
Right.
But if it starts to continue, that's where you start to become, it tends to lead to the agoraphobia, because now all of a sudden you're starting to isolate, where did this happen? And you're trying to find some sort of rhyme or reason to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start to avoid certain situations that you think trigger it.
Right.
And that becomes a very limiting factor, especially in someone's success, as it's about growth and expanding your opportunities, right? So it's one of these things where you have to not feed the fear. And that's really one of the factors that induces panic and a lot of anxiety, is feeding the fear. And this has to deal with something on pressure. So pressure is a great tool, and this is something that we get into a lot with executives and leaders. It's great to have pressure for yourself. It's great to put pressure on others. Okay. The same psychological centers in your mind that induce excitement and thrill and a little bit of exhilaration are the same psychological centers in your brain that produce fright and panic and anxiety. It's just in how you interpret those events in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
So half of it is not feeding the fear that it's a fearful situation, right? So it's, you're going up to give a speech and you have a little butterfly in your stomach, and you can interpret that two ways. Oh my goodness, get me the heck out of here. Or, oh my goodness, this is pretty good. And if you can turn it to the positive side, it actually can keep you sharper. It can actually help you stay on your toes a little bit more, keep you engaged, right? But sometimes you let it go too far. There's actually something called the Lock-Dobson curve. And it's an interesting curve. In fact, am I able to share a screen, or does that not really work on this thing? It's up to you.
You can. I mean, for the audio listeners, it might be tough to,
all right,
see. So maybe describe it for us. And
all right, let me do that.
They can look it up.
So the Yerkes-Dodson curve, and the way it looks is, imagine a slow roller coaster climbing, okay? And it gets to the top. All right. And there's the peak of the roller coaster. And at the roller coaster, what happens then is there's a sharp drop off, right? We all have this picture in our mind, right? So there are 3 phases in that curve. The first phase is when that roller coaster is starting to take off. It's a little bit flat and it's just starting to go up. And that stage is that, look, there's not enough stress. There's not enough pressure to invoke much of a response. And that's why when you and I have a paper that's due, or you and I have a project or task that's due, or our wife tells us to do something, we're like, I'll get to it. Right? There's not enough pressure. Then there's that middle section, which is about, halfway up the curve to just around the peak. And that is the curve, that section, that is the part that really It's your peak performance area. There's pressure. You know your skills. It's time to move. It's time to get going. This is where I can excel and succeed. The problem is on the backside. On the backside, right near the peak, if you induce too much pressure on somebody, their performance drops. The pressure is overwhelming. It is now moved from exhilaration to intrepidation and absolute fear. So when you think of that roller coaster curve, it's if you don't have enough pressure on someone, they're not going to get going. You got to have some pressure on people.
Right.
But if you have too much, it can cause someone to shut down. And actually what ends up happening is they get tunnel vision. They don't think as clearly. It's cramming for a test the night before. There's so much pressure, I can't get it through my head. And that's what happens. So
absolutely. I love the, you talked about excitement, thrill, and exhilaration being the same physical response as fright, panic, and anxiety. I love that when I think about athletes, because you talk to these professional athletes that perform at really high levels and they're getting ready for the Super Bowl, right? And most people, if they're going out in front of millions of people, they'd be nervous, right? And you talk to these pro athletes, and what do they always say? And I love talking about, if you're a fan of Tim Tebow, I don't know if you know Tim Tebow, but his classic Jets video when he became a Jet, how he said, like, I'm just excited. I'm excited. He said it like 100 times, right? But they always would say, man, I am excited. I can't wait to get out there and play that game. And it's just so interesting how, you got people that fear public speaking and they're like, oh man, I don't want to go up and talk in front of all these people. And then there's other people that take that and use it as fuel and say, man, I can't wait to get on stage and go share what I've got to share with the world. And it's really like you said, it's that same physical response. It's just how you choose to interpret it.
It is an interpretation. And so a lot of psychologists will deal with what they refer to as the inner dialogue or the narrative that you use to explain certain events. And, that's not psychobabble stuff. That is, you have a constant narrative that is going through your mind every day. Think about the last time you were upset with your girlfriend or your spouse or someone like that. And it was a fight that lasted a few days. Well, you went to bed angry, you woke up and you were okay. And then you had to remind yourself, that's right, I'm still angry at that person, right? You play that narrative in your mind, even when you're not talking, and it sets the tone and the reactions and the mindset and the attitude and the behaviors that you then demonstrate. So that inner dialogue is a critical element to your performance. Now, there are people who have, myself, present company included, who have a propensity to exude too much pressure on themselves. They are what they like to call themselves high achievers. But their default is too much pressure. And they build up situations too much in their mind. Everything is a defining moment. Everything is a indictment on their skill or lack thereof. And for those people, I spend a lot of my time helping them turn the volume down on the level of pressure that they're giving a particular event. So on that roller coaster, they've gone over the cliff, and what I'm trying to do is stop it and back the roller coaster up. I don't want to turn the pressure off. If I turn the pressure off, then I'm back on the level part of the curve. They're not going to perform. I want to use pressure. I just can't let it seep over too far that it starts to shut them down.
That's a really interesting idea of kind of turning it down. How do you go about like that inner dialogue? Because I think we've all experienced this and can relate to, our mind just starting to race. And I resonate when you talk about the panic attack deal. It's like you have the first one and then your mind starts going crazy. Like, am I going to have another one? When am I going to have another one? Why did that happen? What do I need to avoid to keep that from happening again? You start asking all these questions. And I have another mentor who talks about when our mindset starts spiraling down, we just need to ask better questions. And so how do you approach helping someone if they're experiencing this? Like, what do you see this in? Like, you talk about peak performers. Is this something you see very consistently when you're working with high executives in
Yeah.
that?
So it tends, it's not synonymous with every high performer. It is a tendency of theirs, and perhaps it's not a tendency all the time, but it's a tendency that they can get to often, right? It's something that they can have bursts of that slip over into that realm, versus other people who may have a lot of time. They like to go set up camp there and sit there for a while and panic. All right, that was me. So how do you do that? Well, the ask better questions things is a great tactic. It's a great strategy. The challenge is that when you are in a panic, when things are spiraling, when you're cramming for a test, it's the mindset. Cramming for the test the night before, I don't have time to ask better questions, and I can't think of other better questions to ask. I'm in a panic. I'm in the moment. I'm in the freak out moment. So what do? So you have to de-emphasize. Again, this is for somebody who has gone over the edge. You de-emphasize the level of prominence and pressure that you're giving the event. So for example, I have a number of professionals who do speeches in front of thousands of people, right? They speak all the time. I help them write their speeches. I coach them on giving talks that wow and win over audiences. But that doesn't mean that they don't also feel these types of sensations. In fact, you would be surprised how many celebrities, entertainers deal with these issues that we're talking about here right now, Phil. Panic, anxiety, agoraphobia. So what do? So you ask questions like this to yourself, right? I'm not asking better questions esoterically. I'm asking myself better questions, all right? Again, downplaying, turning the volume down on the pressure. So it goes like this. I have an executive who's going to go up and talk, and I'm just so nervous, Chris. I don't know, what if this? So, Phil, listen, buddy, I hate to break the news to you. I know you're building this speech up in your mind. I know that this is you. We have spent hours working on this speech. I know we've written great content, and tomorrow's the big day. But I got news for you, Phil. Tomorrow morning when you wake up and you have to go give this speech, unfortunately, no one else in the entire audience who will be in attendance, no one else wakes up tomorrow and says, son of a gun, I'm going to make my whole day about Phil's speech. Oh my goodness. My day is a make or break based on Phil's speech.
Yeah.
Okay. I know you are, but they're not.
Yeah.
I've attended all these speeches, and in no time do I make it about my entire day.
Right.
So what are you freaking out for? No one's day is making or breaking it on your speech. I'm sorry.
Nobody's thinking about you.
That's it.
They're not.
So I just took the level of importance and I'm knocked down a peg. Okay, another one. I don't care, Phil. Phil, don't get me wrong, buddy. You're a nice guy. You got a great voice. Okay, you got a great head of hair. I'm a little envious. All right.
Thank you.
All right. But the news, I'm sorry to tell you, Phil, it's not about you. No one's coming to see you, Phil. Okay. Put a monkey up there who can demonstrate that information, deliver it. And those people will still, it's about the content. They want what you got so they can go use it. As pretty as you are, they don't care. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to keep knocking you down a couple pegs so that at the end, you recognize that, oh yeah, this is just the next thing that I have to do today. And it's really just about the content and the information. At the end of the day, these people just want something that they can go and use. It doesn't matter if I deliver it or if I be nice about it, or if all that stuff. We've all sat in speeches that were not home runs. They were a triple. They were a double. Heck, they might have even been a single.
Right.
But you still got something out of it.
Yeah, the message is more important than how you feel about giving it. I love that, man. Absolutely love that.
So
what we talked about asking better questions, and totally agree. When you're in those moments, it's super difficult. Yeah, I mean, you're not in the right mindset to ask the right questions. So how do you seek out resources, individuals, mentors to help you with asking those questions? I mean, you obviously did with your mentor who kind of steered your mindset helped you get on this positive coaching track and kind of changed your trajectory. Was that something you was it hard for you to seek out that mentorship or that help at the time?
I mean, I was in a crisis. I was going from mere survival, right? I can't function through the world. Here's what it is. Look, there are 3 ways to learn. Okay, that's it. There are 3 ways, or only 3 ways. Unfortunately, one way is extremely ineffective. The second way is very expensive. And there's really only one truly effective, practical way to learn. Now, we use all 3. But like I said, there's some real downfalls and detriments to the other 2. Okay, so the first way that people learn is through information, through knowledge, right? You pick up a book, you read it, you listen to this podcast, whatever it may be. It's fine. We use this stuff. So I have a bookcase of all this stuff. All right.
Right.
The problem is I don't recall much from high school. I don't recall much from college. I read books last year. I don't recall everything. Heck, even half of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's not extremely effective in terms of retention and application of just reading and gathering knowledge. Okay. So knowledge gathering, good, but not that effective. Okay. The other way that we learn, okay, let's say that there's an event happening right here, right on a timeline. There's an event horizon. Before the event happens, we can gather some knowledge. We're always kind of reading and learning. Okay, that's great. Well, then there's this after event time to learn. And that's the time to reflect. That's the time to dissect and decipher and analyze. The problem with that type of learning post-event is that it's extremely expensive. Number one, let's hope and pray that the person is self-aware and reflective enough to take the time to want to look back and learn.
Right.
And secondly, my goodness, let's hope that event that we just went through wasn't a defining event, one of those few defining events that you just blew.
Mm-hmm.
I hate the talk in terms of high pressure, but there are some times that you needed to be prepared and you just weren't prepared. Okay.
You better believe it.
Doing it after the fact is we do it. We want to use it, but man, that's an expensive way to learn. So what's the most effective way to learn? The most effective way is right before the event horizon, right before the defining moment in which you are preparing and practicing. You've moved from just information gathering to action, to habit forming, to trying to build a skill in preparation for that event. See, I can read a lot of books over the holidays. You don't read a lot. If you don't do anything with it, if you don't develop the skill, if you don't make it a habit, and it was nice, don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But are you going to be able to use that, especially use it in a focused, defined moment? So how do you go about asking yourself better questions? You need to constantly be on the lookout for folks who can help influence you, who have something that can help broaden your horizon, deepen your understanding, and make yourself more accountable to using these things as opposed to just simply playing with these things.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that you have a faith background. I have a master's in biblical studies. I'm a preacher too.
Oh, wow.
Imagine that. I don't bring that up unless the client wants to go down that path. I always find it very interesting that when I was learning all the stuff on positive psychology, that the professor would be like, we ran this study recently and we found that if you do this, this, and this, you end up like this, and it's really successful. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I'm pretty sure it's in the Bible. That was written 2,000, 3,000 years beforehand, but don't dare bring that up. Don't dare raise my hand because then I'm discredited in the class, right? There's an element that if you are a believer, if you believe that there is a God, that you believe in the Bible, that you're discredited. That's fine. You know what? That's their issue. They have to deal with that. But anyhow, there are a lot of people who attend church.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people who attend their job. There's a lot of people who read a book, a lot of people who read the Bible. There's a difference between knowing the Bible and knowing God. Don't get those confused. There's a difference between knowing information in a book and knowing what the book said. So,
I love that.
How do you go about finding better mentors? Be constantly looking. Be constantly
I absolutely
using it.
The difference between knowing And I call it believing, because if you really believe it, you do it. You could know a lot of things, but until you really believe them, your actions won't follow. And I think, that when you talk about that difference between knowing and really having a relationship with God, the relationship with God is we believe him, we trust him, and then we go do as he wants us to do. So exactly. I absolutely love that. I think that's fantastic. And as you're building these habits and preparing and practicing, that's something you see a lot with professional athletes or people that, for instance, come into a lot of money, right? They'll come into a lot of money, and then they don't even know what to do with it. They end up blowing it. Lottery winners, they get all this money and then they're broke. Well, why? Well, because they haven't built up the habits. They haven't built up the mindset to know even what to do with those things. And it's, I think it's the same way with anybody who's trying to perform at the highest level. You have to be performing at that level. You have to see yourself today as little old Phil or little old Chris and be performing at that level before you're ever going to get there.
Look, leaders are it's interesting. All the clients and companies and executives that I work with, we look for people to develop. We look for people to invest in. Who's going to be the manager. And sometimes you have to pick the person because they're the one that's there, right? But the goal is to develop talent, not just have to go to talent. All right. So I'm not looking for someone who I just pluck out of a field and say, all right, I'm going to give you the skills of leader. I'm looking for people who are already demonstrating it. Mm-hmm. I'm looking for people who already get it. And, and I don't mean to make this go over into the spiritual realm. If you don't want to, we can back off of it.
No, this is great. Let's keep going.
This is the Sermon on the Mount. This is the Beatitudes. Mm-hmm. God's saying, listen, I'm not looking for everybody. I'm looking for people who demonstrate these attitudes. Mm-hmm. And if you have these attitudes, and notice that it starts with being poor in spirit, it's a humbling, it's recognizing yourself in relation to something else. Mm-hmm. You can build upon that and you demonstrate that attitude. Now we can talk about some meatier, more weightier things. You have the right foundation to build upon. And that's how we look for leaders. Right. I'm looking for people who already demonstrate it, who are already doing it. They don't just know it.
Right. Yeah, the GLE core values: faith, love, integrity, and courage. The faith is in something outside of, like, you have to have I believe you have to have an absolute truth outside of yourself. Otherwise, everybody's opinion is just everybody's opinion, sure. And you're just as right as so-and-so. If there's not something outside of you governing your integrity, governing your values, then your values are going to be whatever's in your heart. And you, as you and I know, we're all sinful and our hearts are full of all sorts of terrible things, right?
So that's you nail it, man. I know it's not politically correct. I know that it's not savvy. I know that it's not sexy today to talk about right and wrong, and that there is a truth. I think things of those natures. But unfortunately, just because we don't accept it or we want to deny it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, right? Or that it does exist. One of the things that I like is, so I had you to pick a couple areas of specialty or focus in my biblical training. And so I went down the pain and suffering route, and I went down because of my background.
When did you start your journey before you get into this?
Oh my goodness! So,
it was after your experience, huh?
So I grew up in the church. I attended church because my parents attended church. Mm-hmm. I went off to college. I knew right and wrong. I knew God. I knew of God. Let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. And I figured I was a good person. I was very successful. I figured God was looking over me. And then this happened. This fall, breakdown. And then all of a sudden I start to question, wait a minute. If I look back over my life, it seems like you've kind of been guiding me this way all of a sudden for this to happen? What the heck? So I'm analytical. I'm a pretty critical thinking type person. So I said, fine, you know what? I'm going to give him a shot. I'm going to use all the skills that I've learned about tearing things apart. And I'm going to dive in to see if there's really some legitimacy to this God and Bible thing. And the more I dove into it, the more I went, oh my goodness. And you start to find just some very unique things. I don't believe out of blind faith. I believe because God says that the Bereans search the scriptures. He says in 1 Thessalonians, chapter 5, test all things, prove all things. So I said, fine, I'm going to put you to the test. And then you start to look and you go, oh my goodness. And so then that's when I started my degree for advanced degree in Bible. And so it took me 7 years to do it. Not because I'm dumb, but because I had 3 kids, a job, and a wife.
That's impressive, man. It's amazing.
But no, I specialized in pain and suffering and apologetics. And I always liked when people, the typical response to the Bible is that truth doesn't exist. There's no such thing as truth. I said, oh, are you saying that as a truth? Right?
Explain apologetics for the listeners who may not be familiar with that term.
Apologetics. So the term apology, we think of apology as, oh, I'm so sorry. Apologetics is a Greek term in which it means to provide a defense of. It's like a lawyer term. It's, can you provide a sound argument in defense of your position? Can you prove your position? Mm-hmm. And so there is, do you believe in God? Can you provide a defense for that? Do you believe in XYZ? Can you provide a defense for that? Those types of things.
Amazing. Very cool, man. That's a really cool story. I'm excited about that.
Listen, I started this podcast by saying pain, failure, and it's
amazing, I learned this stuff. It's just so cool how you see God work in people's lives and take them. I find every hard decision or every very tough, emotional, mental moment I've had, right at the brink of where I think like I'm gonna lose it, everything becomes kind of like it's like that one point where I finally let go and just say, okay, it's out of my hands. That's when I see so clearly how my life's been steered exactly where I needed to be, and it's way better than I would have ever imagined or even planned for myself for it to be. It's just it's a wild, I don't know if you've experienced anything like that, but it's kind of this wild thing.
Absolutely. What I think it comes down to is, I heard it described as 11:59:59. 11:59:59, the very last second, something happened and God comes in. And you think, well, oh my goodness, why did he wait so long? I think he waited so long just to prove to you that it isn't you that did it.
Right.
You still needed him.
Yeah. He won't push you beyond what your faith can handle. He pushed you right up to that point, but never beyond. So it's very, very cool. So when you're trying to build a culture in an organization, we have these foundations that leaders have, and, organizations are so dynamic. There's so many different personalities and people. I know you talk about cultures being more of like a family than like a high school, where you've got, spats going on and drama and all these things. And instead of, families that also fight, right? But they love each other at the end of the day and come together and they want the best for each other. So how do you build a culture like that as a leader in an organization?
Sure. So there are 5 fundamental pillars that go to developing a culture, whether it's a family culture at home, whether it's a business, organization, church, doesn't matter. The science of culture is pretty ubiquitous. So here are 3 fundamentals of that to build on. The first are connections. The second is vulnerability. And the third is purpose. So let's just start with those. Connections. It is extremely hard to have a culture with people whom you're not connected to. In other words, connected does not mean that we just happen to wear the same logo branded shirt. That's not connection. Connection is that you're with them, you see them, you talk to them. This whole stuff with the quarantine. Listen, if you don't have your video on during these talks, the conference calls, you're limiting the connection. You really are. And I know that it seems, well, video call, phone call, text message, all that. Listen, I don't know too many arguments that have ever been solved through text message or email.
If not anything, they'll get worse.
It's face. I got to see the face. I got to
Right.
see the tonality. I got to see everything, right? So connection's a good place to start. The second is vulnerability. And that goes twofold. Number one, can you be vulnerable? Can you put your ego aside and show people that there are cracks in your own facade? That's number one. Number two is, can you invoke others to be vulnerable as well? There is a rather prominent organization that I've worked with in the past, who the leader of the organization was not very good at being vulnerable. And because of that, because the leader did not show any cracks in the facade, it was demanded perfection, it demanded high quality, demanded success. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sorry, but number one, I can't relate to that because I know that's not me. Mm-hmm. So now I can't really connect with this leader.
Right.
And secondly, as the stuff, the day in, day out stuff happens, the mistakes happen. Do you think that I'm going to take those mistakes to the leader who won't show any cracks in the facade?
Right.
Heck no. So now the dynamic is a leader who won't show any cracks in the facade, who has to make real-time decisions, but doesn't have real information because no one will bring it to them.
Bad combo.
So can you be vulnerable, and can you get others to become vulnerable with you? And then the last one is purpose. And that just, everything you start with why, Simon Sinek, that kind of stuff. But if at the end of the day, if people cannot connect their actions, their work, their output to something greater than themselves, a meaning, then there's going to be some problems. What's interesting is that nonprofit organizations, look, we all get those darn phone calls, right? Hey, do you want to buy this? Hey, do you want to do this? Can you Instagram me? Okay. They're incessant. They are nonstop. They are persistent. Do you know that most of those folks don't get paid? They're volunteers. Wouldn't you love to have somebody on your sales force who was as persistent as some of those volunteers at a nonprofit? What makes them so tenacious? They believe in the purpose of that organization. Mm-hmm. They get it.
Where does having employees or people in your organization, where does feeling valued as a person come in when you're talking about purpose versus, there's this purpose outside of me that we're serving, but then also feeling like you have a valuable contribution to that ultimate purpose? Yeah. How do those tie together, or do they?
Yeah, they do. There's a macro and a micro purpose, or an internal and an external purpose. So the external purpose, we call it the ripple effect. So the external impact is, what do our customers get? How do we better the world? Okay. The output of our product does this for others. Okay. The internal impact is, and this is sometimes people, when they go to search for their why, or to define their why, or their own internal purpose, they struggle with that. So here's a good way to ask the question. We talked about asking better questions earlier. If you don't do this task, if you don't show up, what happens? What falls apart? Who's cut out? Who's left there standing by themselves if you don't do this or don't show up? When you talk about an intern coming into an organization who feels as if they have no real significant contribution or value to the organization, and you give them a task to do, don't hand them a task. Give them a task and say, here is the importance of this task. You got to find some way to make that task the crux of the organization, that if they don't do this task and do it well, here is the ripple effect upstream and downstream that happens as a consequence. Now, all of a sudden, you have significance with the task. And you do that by saying, if you don't do it, here's the ripple effect. And all of
I
a
love
sudden
that.
now the person goes, oh, I see where this fits. You may not be the CFO, but son of a gun, goodness, the CFO doesn't matter if I don't do this. Okay.
One of the other things we talk a lot about as leaders is sort of the style of leading from the front. I don't know if you've ever heard that terminology. How do you balance? There's like this interesting quote. I can't even remember who the guy is. Some Asian or Chinese philosopher person, but he talks about, when the work is done, the best leaders like don't even exist. Like you wouldn't even see what they did. Like the people did everything, right? And it's kind of just interesting quote that it's always, I don't know if it's worded right, but I've always questioned it. I posted it the other day. But how do you balance leading from the front and being visible and being seen, and really giving your people the credit that is due as a leader, since they're they're really the working all the magic?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So this is kind of maybe this is a good place to kind of to wrap our heads around for the finale here. There are, if you take away nothing from this conversation, I would encourage you to take away these 2 points. There is only one thing that a leader must have. It's the only must-have of leadership. Now, I know that you go to Barnes & Noble, or you go into Amazon, and there's tons of books. There's, thousands and thousands of books on leadership. Forget them. There's only one thing a leader must have. And if they don't have this one thing, I will guarantee you, Phil, I guarantee it, that they are not a leader. The one must-have of leaders is followers. You don't have a follower, you're not leading anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how you have to gain followers is where all the books from Barnes & Noble come in. People skills, risk-taking, confidence, good communication, right? But at the end of the day, you got to have followers. Now, there is a huge difference between having followers and having prisoners. And this is where academics and subject matter experts miss the boat. They have people who come to them all day long. But that's because they have to, not because they want to. If you are a really smart, bright person, be very careful. Constantly be asking yourself, do I have followers or do I have prisoners? The leader's job, the one must-have of leadership, is to have followers. Now, it's the one must-have. The one must-do of leadership is to develop other leaders. Because at the end of the day, you are not going to live forever, and you are not big enough, and you are not wise enough to be everywhere, all places, in all things. You can't do this thing. If you're a good leader, will outlast you. Mm-hmm. So if you're not going to be around, who's going to be leading it then? So the one must-have of leadership is develop followers, and the one must-do is to develop other leaders. I learned a lot from failure, and I try to teach and help and coach people from failure. Look, I'm a pretty good speaker. I'm a pretty good preacher. And I had people for a decade come to the congregation that I was at, and they loved it. And they were, oh, Chris, you're there. Oh, that sermon really spoke to me. Okay. And then after a few years, a gentleman who was a missionary came to the congregation. His family had moved there, and he sat and he listened for a while. And he came up to me after a few months, and he said, you are really good. You really know your stuff. And I said, yeah, well, and I played off humble. Well, God's given me some talents. And he says to me kind of poignantly, he goes, how come you're the only one that preaches, though? And it's like a ton of bricks just hit me in the face, because I had developed a lot of followers on behalf of Christ, okay? But I had not developed any other leaders in the congregation. And so I missed it. And it's easy to do.
Yeah. Chris, man, I love that. I love this conversation. I could sit here and talk to you all day. I know you probably got to run. If people want to find Chris Flickinger and learn more about what you're doing, where can they find you?
So look, social media is great and everything, but the easiest way is the website, chrisflickinger.com. And we have clients all over the country. I have a great team of industrial psychologists behind me that help support. We do everything virtual now. We can do face-to-face. We even travel. Yes, we are some of those that are still traveling during the quarantine. But if there's something that we can do that will benefit you, that will help inspire productivity and a positive culture where you're at, if there's something that we can do to help you get inside the minds of others, perhaps even your own mind, I'd be happy to talk with you and see if there's something that we might be able to do.
Love it, Chris. Thanks for coming on the show, man. I know GLE is going to appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Phil. Really appreciate it. Great show. Thank you.
Hey, take care.